Hey guys, we're going to do a tutorial. I got these aluminum outside links with some steel threaded rod in them. I built them for this SCX10, and we're going to try and do the same thing for my son's SCX10, but we're going to start out with custom steering links. These are the steering links, and I'm going to show you how to make them. This is my son's honcho. Everything's stock. It's got plastic links underneath it, all that stuff. We're going to start building it up here. We're going to start with his steering. It's got this weird plastic stuff here. You know, they're nice because you're not going to break them, but there's a lot of flex in them. You can actually push both wheels in towards each other, and that'll flex. So we're going to get rid of that today. A little better steering, a little more accuracy. So I'm going to go ahead and rip these off, and then I'll start showing you guys how to build them. So hey guys, I'm going to show you these real quick. You'll need to find a little screw here. I'll measure how long it is. And then a screw with a nut. Okay? Everything else is stock. The other screws are there. Those are the only two you're going to need. And we'll measure them here right now. So the first one is about 7/8 of an inch in between the nut and the head. We'll probably have to cut it down like maybe an eighth off of it. We'll use our Dremel for that. And this one is about 3/8 of an inch long, and that's probably going to be about right. We might shave the end of it a little bit just so it's not sticking down and clipping on rocks. You're going to need a Phillips screwdriver. You're going to need a pair of needle nose pliers, some hex drivers, and you're going to need the little T-wrench that came with the kit. Other than that, this is pretty simple. So I'm going to go rip this off, and then I'll show you what's going on. Okay guys, go over this real quick here. I'll show you up close here. There are two screws that are Phillips. Don't even worry about taking this one out. And then this one is a 2mm hex with a nut behind it. And we're going to get that with a needle nose plier. So I'll go ahead and rip these off. I got this idea for the links themselves from another guy on the internet, and I will post his link on there on the video down in the description, so you guys can check out his video also on how he makes them. The only difference I made was I decided to cover them with some heat shrink tape and some duct tape, and I'll show you how I do that. It just kind of make it, you know, a little longer lasting. If it gets scratched up, all I gotta do is replace the heat shrink. So we got that one off. And the heat shrink's kind of cool. You can use different colored duct tape and stuff in the middle, just to give it an extra, you know, cool look. It also keeps the rod ends together from spinning and stuff. It's not, you know, 100%. They could still come off, but it just gives a little extra, you know. Keeps them on there. So we got those two off. We don't need these screws, but I always keep the screws. I mean, you always find a use for something, you know. So I'm going to use these really long needle nose pliers. So I'm going to go behind here. We're going to turn the servo just a little bit so we can get it out from the pumpkin on the differential. And I'm just going to squeeze them. Take my wrench. Take the bolt off. Nut comes out. The whole unit's off. You don't need to measure these, because what we're going to do is we're going to run, and I'll show you up close here. Right here you can see it's attached, and we're going to attach them all over here. We're going to make a longer link for the top. The only reason I do that is because you'd have to drill a hole inside of a round tube trying to get it accurate, and you know, the thread inside, the all thread, is going to get cut if you do that, because you need the screw to go through, so it's not going to work. And if you look at the aftermarket kits that you can buy, they're the same. They're going to go through over here, and that's what we need those extra screws for. So I'm going to go ahead and get the crawler off of here. We're going to set up the vise so we can start cutting our pieces. And I'll give you some measurements. These measurements should work for any SCX10. I mean, they should all be the same. I took them off the factory holes here. I measured those, figured everything out. So I'll go rip this off and we'll get going here. So what we're using here, if I can get it to focus. If you can't read that, it's 832 all thread, okay? And this aluminum rod is 1/4 by 0.035, and this all thread fits right inside there perfectly. I mean, it slides right in there. So we're going to cut the first measurements I'm going to give you are for the aluminum. We're going to cut the aluminum down. That'll space our rod ends where they need to be. And then we'll add 3/8 of an inch to both ends on that measurement for the all thread. The other thing I'm going to use is going to be Revo rod ends. These are for your standard Revo. I like using the shorter ones. They have longer ones too you can buy. I got a pack of those here too. You can see those. Those are a little longer. I like using the short ones, but the long ones are going to work for the links on the bottom for the suspension. You can use whatever you want, but the Revo ones have the right thread, and that's what we're looking for. So the first measurement here for this aluminum, for the upper steering link, is going to be 1.75 inches is what we need to cut that to. Now I'm just going to put it in the vise here. Give it a little room to work. Make sure you don't clamp this down too tight, just enough that it doesn't move. If you clamp this down too tight, you're going to end up pinching the aluminum and you're not going to get the all thread through, and trying to run a drill bit through, especially the long one, is going to be next to impossible. We'll zoom out here. Okay, so we're going to mark this. I like using a little Sharpie. Make sure it's got a sharp tip. You can get some of the fine tip Sharpies too. And I always burn 1 inch. So make sure you're careful. Make sure you remember you're burning 1 inch. We're going to go 1 1.75 inches heavy. So it's going to be a 1/16 or a 32nd over 1.75 inches. Okay. I'm just going to use a grinder with a used cutoff wheel. We don't need, you know, too much room here. Now that we got that cut off, remember it's going to be a little hot. Let's double check the length. We're at 1.75 inches, just a fuzz heavy. What I always like to do is take the grinder and get the burrs off. Make sure the cut's nice and square. If you don't want to use the shrink tubing, you can leave these the raw aluminum. Just make sure the cuts are nice and clean, because you will see them. If you are using the shrink tubing, you really don't have to worry about it. The shrink tubing is going to kind of cover up any gaps or anything like that you have in it. It's still going to be solid. As long as the longest part of your cut is the dimension you want, then you're good to go. So we got that cut. And again, that was 1.75 inches for the aluminum. Okay. We'll go ahead and cut the second piece of aluminum, since we're here with the aluminum. And that measurement is going to be 4 1/16. Right on the nose, 4 1/16. So, and this has got kind of a funky cut on the end of it. I'm going to clean that up a little bit here real quick. Now, if you don't have a grinder like this, you can actually use a Dremel. The Dremel cut-off tools, little cut-off wheels. They'll cut right through this aluminum. They'll even cut the all thread. So either way, you know, you can do that, or you can use a hacksaw if you want. Hacksaw is a little harder, a little more work, but you know, sometimes you got to work with what you got. So we're gonna go 4 1/16 is the second one. So I'm going to go to 5 1/16 because I'm burning an inch. And then we'll go ahead and hack that off. Now I always mark my Sharpie mark on the outside, so when I cut, it's gone, and then I know if I leave any of that cut, it's going to be a little long. It just kind of helps you figure your length out. So since we're covering these with the heat shrink tubing, I'm not worried about how clean they are really. If you're going to leave them raw aluminum, make sure you're not nicking them and stuff. They're going to get scratched up when you're crawling. That's just the way it is. So we got those two cut. Those are the only two we need for the aluminum. And again, that aluminum is 1/4 by 0.035. Got a hole down the middle of it. I bought it at Ace Hardware. I think it was like $3 for a 3-foot stick or something like that, if I remember right. I did the ones on mine a couple years ago, so I don't know what the price is now. So now we're going to do the all thread, and like I said, we got to add 3/8 of an inch to our all thread for each side, because that's how much needs to go into the rod end, the Revo end. So take our X-Acto knife here and get this sticker off. This stuff was pretty cheap too. I think I bought enough material to do the steering links and the suspension links for my crawler. So that's 8 links plus the 2 up front. So you got 10 links there. I bought all those. I think it was $23 for the material for that, and then the rod ends, you can get 12 of them for like $6 or $7, something like that at the hobby store. So it's pretty inexpensive, and if you look at the cost of it is about the same or less as buying a kit, you know, from Axial or whatever. But with this, like with my C10, I had to add an extra 1/2 inch to the wheelbase from the Jeep JK. So I was able to actually make it perfect for the wheelbase, so it fit right inside the fenders. Everything looks nice and pretty. The drive shafts will extend to a certain point. I mean, I'm probably pushing the limit on them, but your kit should come with longer ones also. I actually have some that are 1/4 inch longer that the kit came with that I could put in there if I wanted to. But I'm actually have some new drive lines coming right now. We'll do another install video on those after this. So we're going to cut this all thread, and we got to do some math here. If we're 1 3/4 inches, we got 1 3/4 inches. I need 2 1/2 for my all thread. All thread is a little harder to mark, and you want to make sure that your thread is not messed up on the end here. You want to grind it back, make sure it's nice and smooth. You don't have any burrs on it or anything. Another thing you can do if you feel inclined to do that, you can buy a tap and die set, which works really good. You can screw the die on here, cut it, run the die back off of it, and it'll re-thread the end of this so that it goes into the rod ends better. You can also tap the rod ends. They'll fit in there a lot better that way. So there's lots of other stuff we can do here. I found that it's just a little extra work, and it's not really necessary. So we're going to go 2.5 on this, and this is for the upper. We had 1 3/4 inch for the aluminum, 2.5 for the all thread. So basically you want to add 3/4 inch to whatever your measurement was for your aluminum. And this goes the same for the links. What I did for the links was I measured the holes that were on the factory links for the front, and I just basically took my my rod ends, set them right at the holes so they were the same length. I used some bolts to get it, and then I measured the aluminum space in between the two rod ends. And then I added the 3/4 for my all thread. So let's just check here. That looks pretty good. That might be a little big. We'll get a rod end out here. That should work perfect. So there's our top link, minus the rod ends. And then we need to cut another one. Let's see, we got 4 1/16. So we're going to need to go 4 13/16 will be our cut. 4 13/16. Let's see if this guy's long enough here. Should be 5 13. It's a little short, so let's get a longer piece here. You know, these don't need to be insanely accurate. If you're off by a 1/16, it's probably not going to kill you. There's some slop in the front of the, you know, in the steering anyways. When you're driving, it's kind of wobbling around. If you're a little off, you know, if your toe is a little off on the front, it's probably not going to kill you. I mean, if you're off by a ton, it's going to wear your tires fast, you know, stuff like that. But, you know, and you can adjust them if you want. So that's 4 13/16. You can make these wider if you wanted. You know, if you wanted to tune the suspension a little bit, a little more toe in, toe out, you can adjust those. With the 4-link suspension, when you're doing those suspension links, and we'll get into those on another video. If you're a little off on your measurement, that's fine, as long as you have the 2 lower links at the exact same measurement. So if you're a 1/16 off, it might change your pinion angle a little bit, but that's not going to kill you too much. The biggest thing is you want to get both sides the same, because if you don't get both sides the same, you're going to end up with a crooked axle. It's going to be driving funny down the road. We don't want that. So I'm going to get rid of all these all thread here that aren't what we need. Best way to do this is just to start turning it on there. If you have a tap and die set, I would suggest using it. It does make it easier. I don't have one, and I didn't think it'd be worth the 30 or 40 bucks, you know, to go buy one. And you can start these fairly easy. What I always do before I put the aluminum on, I just take my two hex drivers here, and I just spin these on until they're tight and they're threaded. And then I'll take one off and put the aluminum on. Before we put the aluminum, or before we put both rod ends on, we'll slip the heat shrink tubing over it. And that heat shrink tubing, it's tight enough that it won't fit over one of the rod ends, so you'll have to take those off. And actually, you know, it might, if I don't have the ball swivel in there, it might actually fit over, so we'll see. Okay, so those are tight all the way. I'm going to take them back off. It's kind of a tedious process. You can put the ball joints on, you know, with the aluminum on there if you want to. I always like threading them first. It just seems to be easier. So we're going to slip that on there. And then we're going to figure out what we want to do for our center stripe. You don't have to do one. You could put 3 of the heat shrink tubing. If you got heat shrink tubing that goes all the way across, it'd look pretty sweet with just black all the way across it. I like to use red on it because it kind of stands out. My crawler has red on it, so that's what I'm using. My son's might be painted red, I don't know yet, so I'm going to put the red on it right now. And then if I got to replace it later, all I got to do is take the X-Acto knife, take all that stuff off, put a new color on, change it, whatever I want to do. So I'm just going to take a strip of red duct tape, pull off about 2 inches. I like to do it a little thicker. You could just go around the aluminum once, but it stands up a little better if you do it a couple times. So we'll wrap this around. Get it on there nice and smooth if you can. This one kind of folded. We're going to cut a little back. But if you're using heat shrink tape, the tighter the better. You don't want to have to burn the crud out of it to get it down to where you need it. You got to be careful when you're burning it with a lighter, because you might tarnish the duct tape. I'm going to take this 2 inches and I'm going to cut off about a 1/2 inch, or 2.5 inches. I'm going to cut off about a 1/2 inch just to give it a little more red in the center. You don't have to do the duct tape though. You know, you could put 3 of these across, or if you got longer tubing. I just kind of like the way it looks. So then we'll get these slid on. Put on the other rod end. Now that it's threaded, it's going to be a lot easier to go on. That's why I do it before, just to make it easier. You do have to take it back off. Maybe it would be easier to do it at the beginning, but I don't like doing that. So we'll get it on there. When you thread these on, you're going to want them to be perfectly flat to each other. They're going to be parallel to each other once they're screwed on. The bottom link will be. The top link, they're going to be at about a 90 each other. If you're off just a hair, you know, I wouldn't cry about it. There's a swivel ball in there that'll help correct whatever you've done. So we got this flat now. And then we're going to take it, and I always look at the way I put the tape on. You want the tape, if you're bumping up against rocks in the front of it, you want the tape, if it's going to peel off, to be peeled from the back side so that the rocks are, you know, maybe helping it stick on. it's gonna get, you know, tore up and thrashed and stuff like that. And then we're gonna put the words. There's some little words. I don't know if you can see those. The little words are in the back. We're gonna keep those in the back there, so you don't see them. Then I'm just gonna take the lighter and just let it cool off a little bit. You know, let it shrink down on there real good. You can use a heat gun too. I like using the lighter. It's a little easier to control the heat. If you're not careful, you will burn it. So there's our finished link for the bottom. Nice and black, the little red stripe in the middle. We're not going to do the red stripe on the top one. I didn't do it on mine, and I think it looks kind of cool that way. So the top one, we're just going to put the rod ends on and a piece of heat shrink that's about the same size. Should be able to just use, I think, one solid one. When I did it last time, I just used one. Didn't have to cut any off of it. If you decide to do the links, you're going to have 20 rod ends that you're going to need. And I'm going to put this in the vise. The smaller one's kind of hard. You'll need 20 of those rod ends. So I think they come in packs of 12, so you'll need 2 packs. Again, don't tighten the vise down too much. You'll end up ruining the threads. You ruin them in the middle, not that big of a deal. But the end, you'll have a little trouble. We got that one on, and let's try it just to see. Let's put the aluminum on there. Oh, let's get our, well, see if it'll slide over it here. We got to cut a little off. We'll cut about a 1/4 inch off. And it will slide over the rod ends, so we'll put that on and then get that on. I'll be right back. Okay, so we're back. I've got these. If you can see them, see how they're at 90 from each other? That's how we're going to want to keep them. They don't have the balls in them yet. We will be putting those in. So we'll get this about centered. It really doesn't matter which way the letters, if there are letters on it, are facing, because you can flip this both ways and it'll kind of work. But if you want to visualize it to see, make sure you don't do it wrong, you can. Use lighter here. So there you go. Little black link. You can leave them aluminum too if you want. I just got bored with it. So that's the only reason I changed it. So those are complete. We need to put the ball joints in. When you get them in the pack with the Revo rod ends, they don't have the ball joints in them, but they do have metal ball joints. They're metal little swivels, which is good. You're basically going to get a good upgrade with this, and it's fairly inexpensive. You can kind of customize it. These balls are kind of a pain to put in, but they'll just pop in. Watch your fingers when you're doing this, because you can pinch it. Blood blister hurts like a mother. I did it on the last set. I put on 20 of those rod ends, and I definitely pinched myself a couple times. And it does not feel good. Okay, so we got those popped in. You can see them. They're popped in there. The little ball joints in there. Swivels. I'm going to take the vise and I'm going to put my stand back in it, get the crawler back on there, and then I'll show you what we have to do. The screws that I had are just screws I have. I mean, I have a friend, his dad was big into RCs. He gave me a bunch of extra screws. But you can go find these screws anywhere. Hobby store will have them. Measure the length and what the diameter needs to be. Get some nuts and stuff like that. But any hobby store is going to have probably all this stuff. They're just RC screws, so you'll find them anywhere. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the crawler on here, and then I'll show you what we're gonna do. Okay, I decided to show you guys something that I always do. I was gonna leave it off camera, but I'm gonna put it on camera. I take some Speed Clean motor cleaner. Well, I've got these all spread out and accessible. I take this motor cleaner and hit the joints up there, the axle joints. You might as well do a little maintenance while you're upgrading. That's what I always say. Better to do it now than to have to rip it all apart again, you know, to do maintenance or even replace parts. So that motor cleaner will evaporate fairly quickly. You guys probably can't see it, but it's pretty much gone now. And I take this white Teflon grease. And I just get a little in there. I pack it in there pretty good. Roll it around. Stick the tip of the, grease tube in there. Get it in there really good. Greasing these will attract dirt. I'm aware of that. It's going to stick in there. But I usually do this about every 4 times that I drive it. If you leave them without grease in them, they'll last. But if you're out crawling like me, I've got a 5,000 milliamp battery. And I'm out there for an hour, hour 15, hour and a half. You know, I live in North Idaho. During the summer, it's like 9,500 degrees. They will heat up. And yesterday I actually snapped the front drive line on mine, the little pin in there, because I hadn't greased it for a while. So I always make sure there's some grease on stuff. Hit the drive line, stuff like that. I already did his before we started this. But that Teflon grease seems to work. It doesn't attract a lot of the dirt, but still keeps it greased. So this screw that I have here that I found, you know what, hold on, let me get my caliper and I'll tell you exactly what the width is of it. So all of these screws are a standard M3. They're 3mm diameter. This one I know is a little long. I had to cut it on mine. We need 14 millimeters for these, plus the nut is 4 millimeters, so we need 18 millimeters of shaft, not counting the head. Where's the 18? Right there. So yeah, this is gonna be a little long. Might actually end up cutting it down. Let's shave some off the end. I'm going to take about 1/8 of an inch off. I don't mind if it's sticking down a little, but I don't want it sticking down too far. It does go inside the wheel here a little bit if you have like 2.2 tires on there, so it's probably not going to hit. He's got 1.9s, so it's kind of exposed there. We'll cut it down. I almost forgot the one no-no when you're cutting a bolt. Thread the nut on past where you're going to cut. So I thread the nut on way past where I'm going to cut. That way after we cut, we can take that nut back off and it'll help rethread, take off little burrs and stuff like that. Like I said, if you got a tap and die set, you know, that works too. Unless you're doing this stuff a lot, you know, you might not justify going out and spending $60 on a good tap and die set. With this RC stuff, you really don't need a really nice set. I have a fairly decent set that was like 12 bucks. I think I picked it up at Harbor Freight. And it does what I need, you know, when I need it. But the one thing it does not have is it didn't have an M3, so I had to go buy a single one. Anyway, so let's get this. I always start with the double. See where they're doubled up? I always start with that one first because it's the hardest one to put on. Then all you got to do is take your 2.5 millimeter, in this case, that's what my hex is on this. Take the M3 bolt, and we're going to thread it through the outer hole in the front knuckle here. We're going to put the nut in here. Get that on there. You can do it real tight if you want. I usually leave a little bit of slop just because if you get it too tight, it puts pressure on those swivels and it won't, it'll just make the steering a little stiffer, make your servo work a little harder. That's pretty loose. I use a lock nut, you know, so if it is a little loose, you're not going to be losing stuff. The other nut or bolt that we have here is an M3 also. And it is, it's about 12 millimeters long. That might be a hair long, but now that I'm looking at it, that's probably perfect, man. We're going to get the 2 millimeter hex for this one. And we're just going to thread it through the front here. Use the outer holes. If you don't remember when you take it off, use the outer holes. Because the dimensions I gave you were for those outer holes. You can use the inner holes. I don't see any point in doing it because you just got a big chunk of plastic sticking out that's going to hook on stuff. So we got that done. Then the only thing left to do is to take the stock bolt that we took off before and the nut that I had to use these pliers for. That's the beauty of it. You know, it uses most of the stock stuff. You could actually probably use one of the stock bolts if you didn't put the ball swivel in, but I wouldn't recommend it. So we got that through. Make sure we got the right thing here. This is like probably one of the hardest pieces to put on, connecting that servo horn on. I've tried to taking the servo horn off and it's not any easier really. The hardest part is you don't have a very good view back there. So getting everything to line up is kind of a pain, but okay, so we got that on. This one I like to tighten down pretty good. Since it is moving back and forth, it could loosen. So we got that on there. And that's pretty much it, you know. Didn't take too long. Looks kind of cool. I'll take the camera here and you can see what we did. So that's our finished product right there. And it looks like, I'm looking in here, I put the bottom one on backwards. You can see the words. So I'll end up flipping that around. But you can see it looks kind of cool. It's going to be stronger. Before, you could actually take both of these wheels with that stock and bend them in. So if you got in a bind, one of these tires got stuck in between some rocks, you go to turn, it's not going to do anything, just the other one might if it's loose. So this right here, it's going to put more pressure on the servo. These servos are fairly inexpensive. I have millions of extra servos, so I'm not really worried about busting a servo. This is a lot better, more accurate. You won't get so much wobble in the front end. If you are driving at high speeds, hill climbs and stuff, you get that kind of wobble, it sends you off. So this is going to be a lot stronger. And I think this might have taken about an hour. So very good. You can build these links on the bottom here, and I'll do another video on it. But these links that are on the bottom here, you can build this same way. They fit right in with all the factory bolts. All you got to do is buy the aluminum, the all thread and stuff like that. And like I said, I got the idea for the links themselves from another guy, and I can't remember his name, but I'll put his video in the description or a link to it so you guys can check that out too. He uses a Dremel tool to cut his, same thing. That's what I did the first time because I didn't have a grinding wheel. And it's just as easy. Then you can adjust your wheelbase, you know, and that's cool too. You can adjust the camber on these if you wanted. You could shave a little off if you wanted it, or not the camber, but the toe. You could toe it in a little or whatever if you wanted to. So thanks for watching, guys. There's going to be more build videos. I think the next one we're going to work on, we're going to try and do an aluminum flatbed with scale. I'm going to use some old tires, some 1.9. I'm going to end up using like some Traxxas axle carriers and stuff like that on the bottom. Make some cool suspension. We'll put a winch on it, stuff like that. So stay tuned for that. And thanks again, guys, for watching. I really appreciate it. A like, a comment, subscribe, whatever. You guys have better ideas, go ahead and put them in the comments, man. Because we, you know, in the RC community, we need to help people, you know, each other out. If you got anything better that you see could be better to do this, or you got another idea, or even different rod ends, whatever, you know, just leave them in the comments, man. We need to help each other out. So thanks again.